want to start with Formula E in general. Like you kind of saw what you've been up to 7 weeks. Let's talk about getting the Formula E gig. Actually, like how did that come about?
Well, it's a bit of an interesting one. So there's a gentleman at Formula E called George Tidmas. Now, George and I have known each other for a few years. So rewind back to 2019. I was working on a rallycross championship that had just started out. Anyway, it was brand new, and they got this production company in that were, how do I put it politely? Not up to the job. You were used to doing rallies and things and basically they were overstretched and under resourced, and it wasn't necessarily their fault because the budget wasn't there. Anyway, they did the production for this, and it went out on Eurosport. Anyway, the production was not brilliant, so they sent a producer along, and George at that time worked for Eurosport, so that's how I met him. Anyway, that was 4 years ago, right? So we met there. And I sort of kept in semi-regular contact, as you seem to do. And this industry is very much about who you know. And yeah, sort of fast forward to the middle of last year, and I got a message from George, and he said, would you be interested in maybe doing some Formula E bits and bobs later on in the year? And I was thinking, okay, well, that's sounds like it could be good fun. And then I got a call from him a little bit later on in the year, a few months later, thinking, oh, nothing's going to happen. And then he said, actually, do you fancy coming on board and doing Rome? So I went and did Rome as a bit of an audition. Wasn't scheduled to do anything else, and got sort of pulled in by the head of broadcasting there. And he said, we really liked what you've done this weekend. Would you like to do London as well? And I was actually supposed to be racing myself that weekend in Rallycross. So I thought, oh, well, what do I do? And I spoke to my family and my then girlfriend, and said, what do I do on this? And they said, you've got to go and do it. So I was like, okay, all right. So Dad went and drove the race car. I went and did Formula E in London, and then got offered the gig for this year. So that's kind of how it started and where we are today.
Wow, that's mad.
Out of curiosity, I want to ask, how did the rallycross race go with your dad in the car?
Well, it was the first event, and so we bought the car as a write-off. We built it up, put a new cage in it, went testing. After 2 laps, I blew the thing up. So that went down really well, as I'm sure you can imagine. Then we put a new engine in it, and we didn't have time to test it. So the first time racing it was its first test, basically. So I think Dad finished 6th overall, but that was only out of about 10 drivers. So he didn't do too badly, but yeah, there was room for improvement there, that's for sure.
Talk to me about that's really interesting, like the rallycross and the motorsport side, because obviously we're all massively interested in motorsport, and obviously you're now driving it with your dad too. If and I'm not, when I don't know if you remember the Top Gear episode, right, where they do the rallycross for the price of a golf clubs, right?
I was watching that one the other day.
I get the vibes from that. Like, talk to me, like, when did you get into motorsport? Like, when did you actually want to be a driver or do rallycross? How did that story come about that you're a rallycross driver?
I think like most people in motorsport, most commentators essentially, we're all frustrated racing drivers. And, I grew up watching Formula One with my granddad and my dad, and it was always on the telly. So my dad's a mechanic. He built my rallycross car for me, and he used to race before I was born. He was in the British Championships and was quite competitive. I think he was British champion one year in the production class. And so I grew up watching old VHS tapes of him. And I thought that'd be really cool to do that one day. But as you know, the only way to make a small fortune in racing is to start with a big one. And we never had a big fortune. So we never went racing. I had a go-kart. We sold it because I looked at entry fees with my dad, and it was like 10 grand just to enter, for half a season. And then that's not including the upkeep and the tyres and all of those sorts of things. And, being 11 and not having a source of income, it was never really going to work out. So that was quite a short-lived dream. And then went and decided to become a commentator sort of in my mid-teens. Thought, that's kind of it as far as racing is concerned. Never really going to get into it. And then got very fortunate with my job with Gran Turismo that gave me a bit of time and also a little bit of disposable income. And I thought, well, now's the time to go and do it. So decided to go and do that. I think I was, how old would I have been? 21, 22 when I did my first event. So I was like really late coming into it. And I only do it at like a club level. So it's nothing, professional or anything like that. But I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite forms of motorsport to commentate on and to race in, and it's just really good fun.
I suppose that first race weekend in Rome, it was an audition. So how much nerves was there going into the start or qualifying or that first practice session when like this is it, like and to know that, I suppose in the back of your mind you obviously realised that there was an opportunity maybe potentially to get the gig full time that you have. So how was the emotions building up to that first practice session, or the race itself?
It's very nerve-wracking. It always is going to be, going into something like that, because you know that there's a lot of weight behind it, And I went into it thinking, go in, enjoy the experience, and whatever happens on the other side happens on the other side. If you get the gig, you get the gig, and you've done a great job. If you don't get the gig, it wasn't meant for you, and that's just kind of the strategy that I had to employ with it, really. But, going into FP0, the rookie free practice that we had, that was quite useful, actually, because it was a good sort of introduction as to how the broadcast works and, quite on air. I was just sort of trying to keep myself calm and just waiting for something to go wrong or whatever, and ready to kind of pick it up. But the more you do with commentary, the more experience that you get, but you're never going to feel fully prepared, and working for new people is always going to be daunting. So I just wanted to go in there, keep my head down, do as good a job as I possibly could. But I was definitely nervous, absolutely no doubt about it. And I just tried to take every session as it came, go out, talk to people afterwards, get the information that I needed to get, and those sorts of things, and just build up gradually. It's much like, if you're a rookie driver coming into a weekend, you don't go out and go 110% on the first lap, because you're going to end up in the wall, right? You have to leave yourself some headroom. So I just wanted to build up slowly and, come into it free practice 0, free practice 1, free practice 2, getting a little bit more, experience and a bit more confidence each time, and just sort of not overstep the mark. So if I didn't know something, ask. I had Alan McNish. He's one of the best commentators I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and it was the first time I'd ever worked with him. But he knows it inside out from a driver's perspective and from a team's perspective as well, because he's done both sides. So, yeah, it was just a case of get there, keep your head down, and try not to bugger it out. Basically,
did you want a simple race?
You saw when you didn't. Is what happened. The four races that you did at the end of the season, not sure how many hours that you had to fill in the end.
It was an hour and a half, I think, wasn't it, in the first race? I mean, that was a baptism of fire, wasn't it? Straight into your hello, welcome to Formula E, bang, biggest crash of the season, and an hour and a half long red flag. I mean, I was quite lucky that we had Prez to go to, so we had Nicky, we had Radzi, we had Saunders down in pit lane, because when I did CV Repsol and the championships for Dorna, if there was a red flag, 9 times out of 10, there was nothing to go to. So you're just sat there commentating. There was no presentation team to kind of throw down to and fill in those gaps. So you kind of got used to filling relatively quickly. And also things like radio experiences as well. When I was doing shows, sometimes the play out system would crash. So you're sat there, talking absolute nonsense whilst your arms are over here and you're fiddling away trying to put a CD into the player because you're trying to restart the computer and it's all gone completely haywire. So I got used to filling relatively quickly. So yeah, going into Rome was always going to be an interesting one, but it became a bit of a running joke sort of amongst my friends that I had a bit of a red flag curse, because I did 4 races last year and 3 of them got red flagged.